Good morning. It is Wednesday, July the 31st, 2024. And today I want to do a video about foster care. Um, this is a message for all foster care providers, whether you are a pet foster care provider or a foster provider for children for the Department of Social Services or a private agency being funded by the Department of Social Services. And I hope both of these foster parents will watch this video objectively and hear what I'm saying without feeling judged, because there are some good foster parents who genuinely want to provide the kind of temporary support that is needed to help stabilize an animal or a child until they can return home, ideally. But of course, usually in the case of pet fostering, is to prepare the pet to be adopted for whatever reason. But there are also people who are very bad foster parents. And the differentiation is the motivation for fostering. Some people foster because it pays and you can make money. And some people foster because they don't have any friends and they like to be in charge and they need somebody who they can rely on to be available for them for all of the needs that they should get met through interpersonal relationships with their family members, friends, and spouse, if that be the case. And so they place expectations on children that they shouldn't, because they demand that they be responsible for them emotionally and socially at a time when they really need to be supported, and so on and so forth. The reason why I wanted to do this video, though, is because I've been posting videos expressing my frustration around people who are not willing to work in their own home to bring their own homes to a place of health, safety, and happiness, and what the reasons for that might be, and how people can seriously begin to approach that so that they are able to assist with holding accountable the people who are creating the problems that all of us face as barriers to being able to live in a paradise worldwide. And the reason why I want to address foster parents is because there is a inherent benefit to raising children or being pet caregivers that you would not have otherwise, because it requires that you do problem solving. And people who are willing to problem solve, especially as it relates to living plants, animals, and people, learn a lot, and they can see how all of these systems are interconnected as they look into remedies and solutions to the problems that they're having to address in their own home. And this was brought about because I've been posting about Chili, because in the last 24 hours, there's been a shift in her ovulation cycle, also called a heat cycle. And so I've had to do a lot more research because I'm concerned she might have a yeast infection, and she's been urinating everywhere inside the house, which is, a behavior she didn't even have when she first came here. So, just trying to figure that out. And I've been talking to Deja and also with Amaya, and I talked to Jermaine a little earlier, because it helps not only to vent it, because it's frustrating to have to clean up 3 different pee spots in an hour when I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. But also just, as I was talking to them, they each had a perspective of what was going on, and not only trying to support me, like saying, well, did you try this? Or maybe you need to do this, just to self-care. But also, just some ideas about, what they thought might be helpful with Chili, which gives them an opportunity to also do some problem solving that will help them too. Deja was on the internet and looking things up while we were talking on the phone, and I was able to FaceTime her, and she was like, well, I can't see, the inflammation or the redness that you're talking about. And so, we got on FaceTime so that she could look and see and kind of make comparisons to what she was researching, which is like an interdisciplinary consult, for professionals who understand what that means. Is being able to talk to other people and gain some different perspectives, but from people who focus on different areas because they have different gifts. And so because they have different gifts, they may have another perspective on what to try. So, I hope that it's all making sense and that you're pulling together the point that I'm trying to make here, and how we all could work together and learn from each other and grow, and still be out of each other's way, um, in paradise worldwide, if we were willing to do that. So, the first thing that I want to do is, I'm going to share with you an audio clip from a conversation I had with, um, the administrator for the Norfolk Animal Care Shelter, as I was advocating to adopt Chili, who had been, captured and brought to the animal shelter because she was a stray. Even though she was dwelling on our property, she wasn't officially ours. So I had to do a lot of advocacy for that. And, even though I've shared that video, and it's here if you want to listen to the whole conversation, I know that everybody's not going to listen to that hour-long conversation. There are some people who absolutely were probably interested in hearing the entire conversation, and if you, understand the full scope of it, then you may be as well. But, I'm going to share part of it because as we were talking, I was being, my advocate, my child advocate, was being triggered because as she was talking, what she was saying were the same kinds of things I would hear social workers say. And I told them that. And that's the part of the clip that I'm going to share. I'm like, this is very similar. Everything that we're talking about here is very similar to the foster care system. So as a result of that, I decided to come to my journal, and all of my journals in some way, shape, or form in the past 2 years are organized in the same way that this one is. This one has a lot of names in different departments because it was this notebook that I was using to organize my legal complaint. But I just kind of wanted to show you, for people who question my capacity to lead us to paradise worldwide, how just focusing on the issues that were going on in my home allowed me to do some significant, one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing, and how I was able to, find names, different departments, different initiatives, and things like that, and then start to organize them in a way that I could come back and reference them. So the one that I want to share with you today is this State 9 entry that I did, because it starts with me learning about the Virginia Department of Wildlife resources. And this really concerned me a lot. These are the hunting people, and learning about how a person obtains a hunting license, which is different than a gun license, and how hunting is organized in terms of seasons, times of day, things like that, was really, really just alarming to me. Even though I knew people hunted, but my bigger concern was that, I don't have a problem with hunting when people are hunting for food, but this is not what this is. This is hunting as a sport. And so, people may or may not eat the animals that they hunt, or even use their pelts and so forth, for useful purposes. And it really upset me a lot. But that led me to start asking the question about, who were the uh divine nine of the government, because I was still trying to figure out what the easiest way to file the complaint was. And at this particular time, I started looking at the Virginia Department of General Services, which relates to the conversation that I had uh, as I was advocating for Chile. And so I just wanted to share these with you all so that you have an understanding of the Department of General Services, um, and sort of how I started to think about things, and to then just invite you to consider for yourselves just the entire nature of fostering, um, and its benefits, but also the consequences of, um, especially as it relates to children, separating people from their biological families. Kinship care was a huge advocacy focus for me, that, if a family is struggling and they need help with the kids, in traditional society, then the grandparents would step in to provide the support that was needed to help get the home stabilized. But of course, if our elders are being incapacitated and killed, then they aren't available to do that for their children, so that their grandchildren are adequately cared for, and we all achieve the goal of raising 3 generations successfully in our lineage. So let me share the audio with you now from the conversation I had, to give you even more context, and just kind of leave it with you to think about um, how these two systems interrelate, because I think that we may be coming to a place where all of this is converging onto a targeted department in government or area, that people are not correlating to these systems and how they operate and how they function in our daily lives at the individual and household level. I can continue to do advocacy for Chili and animals like her, beyond bringing her home. So, as I am sharing the audio from the phone call with you, I will also be sharing some information that I have been able to gather on Siobhan and the Office of General Services, and hope that within context, you will be able to piece together the relevance of the advocacy that I want to do for Chili and animals like
That's
her.
I'm not trying to say that she wasn't, or she didn't behave differently in your setting. That's not what, we're disputing. I'm not trying to dispute that. But based off of Chili's behavior in the shelter, Chili has been deemed an animal that's not eligible to be adopted, because we do have to have a protocol in place based on the behavior that we see, whether or not we deem this animal safe enough to go into any home, not just your home. Because remember, adoption isn't just for you. If we put Chili up for adoption, Chili is up for adoption, period. So that could be anyone that has an interest in Chili, right? And what we deem based on Chili's behavior is that she cannot be fostered or adopted. However, because of the evidence you brought forth about the things you have done to care for her and the things you have done to acclimate her with an environment, with the family, Alice said, okay, fine. You sent that video. She can say, I can now say that you can reclaim her as her owner. So the issue here is, I think that you want to go through this adoption process, but we can't allow that, because we have already made Chili not eligible to be fostered or adopted, period. But what Allison can do for you, based off of the things you've already invested in Chili, is give you the opportunity to reclaim. If you reclaim Chili and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you could bring Chili back. Now, as far as euthanasia, I'm going to be very honest with you. For every citizen that feels like we shouldn't, you know this, by virtue of, I'm sure you do, I can tell you're very passionate about animals. So for every person that says they don't believe in euthanasia, there's another citizen that thinks we should. And unfortunately, we can't please everyone. We do not, that we are an agency that, for all intents and purposes, are very proud to have the highest save rate we can have. If you look on our webpage and you look at data about us, you'll see that. But we are an agency too, because we're a shelter, and we're an open intake shelter, which means we do have tons of animal and that tons of space all the time, that we are an agency that will euthanize. So, I just want you to understand why this is nothing that we're trying to do to be, argumentative with you, or anything that we're trying to do to keep you from having Chili. But if you have Chili, you have to own Chili. We cannot put Chili through the adoption program process based off of the behavior the staff has seen while Chili's been in our care.
Okay, Siobhan, let me ask you, do you mind if I call you Siobhan?
Oh, no, not at all.
Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You are doing a better job than most.
Please
Yes.
tell me how to pronounce your name correctly.
Yvonne. No, it's right, Siobhan. It's
Siobhan.
right.
Okay,
Yes.
Siobhan. Um, I just want to be transparent with you and tell you two things and then ask you a question. The first is that I don't know if you're from here, but I have lived in Virginia my entire life, and I have lived in Norfolk for the last 25 years. And for the last 30 years, I have worked as a advocate in the foster care and adoption system with social services. And everything that you just said to me, I have heard that exact conversation minus the euthanasia part from social workers involved in foster and adopting. And so the second thing that I want to say is I have to assume that this philosophy that you have shared with me is a condition of city governance over placements where people need to be and where animals need to be or not be. And of course, euthanizing people is not an option in social services, but every other thing that you said is. And just for Allison, as a side note, I know that you're from Richmond, but if you look at the history of kinship care and kinship care advocacy in Virginia and in Norfolk specifically, because that was the feather in my cap. It was kinship care, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about people who have, the word is ownership, but people who have kinship with the children who are brought in care. They may not have birthed them, but they have a vested interest in what happens to them because it's their kin. And so they're willing to do things that social services was not willing to accept as acceptable based on their standard, because I've got your kid now. And so now, because this child is in my care, I get to decide what is in their best interest. And I don't think that you all, because you raised the people who we had to take them from, would be qualified. I can't tell you how many times I had to go to war against that kind of mindset. Now, but the question that I have is the reason that you are not able to take Chili and I through an adoption process because it will become a legal and liability issue for the shelter if I claim ownership via adoption versus just showing up and picking her up?
Allison, you might can answer that better than I can, but I think I know the answer. But if you want to try to answer that, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I can answer from a procedural perspective, and then if you have other feedback, of course, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
The reason that Chili is not a candidate for adoption or foster is that her behavior in the kind of environment that she would need to move through the foster and adoption process is not safe for handling. She's not safe for our team to handle. Therefore, we are not able to provide her with the kinds of interactions and care that are associated with the foster and adoption process, nor can we place her in a position where she is around other members of the public and could potentially injure them as well out of concern for everyone's safety.
Okay. And as a result of that, it could potentially be a liability issue if we were to do that.
Right. I just wanted to pause right here for a second to ask people to consider, given what was just explained to me, who should be responsible when a call is made for determining whether or not the complaint is valid before they take the animals into care to be sheltered, because there obviously are going to be times when they have to capture an animal that is very sick, and it doesn't matter whether there is an owner or it's a stray or it's a wild animal or not. It becomes a public health risk. But in cases like mine, where you have a neighbor that's calling on somebody else's dog that's wandering around, for example, because that will be the situation that I'll be in once Chili is here, who should be responsible or held accountable for making that kind of decision? Because they know how to capture and they can transport to the animal shelter, but then does the animal shelter have right to refuse? It's important for me to know here that Siobhan is the one of two assistant directors for the Office of General Services. The director is actually Nikki Riddick. And we discuss all of this in the call, which is actually not an hour. The conversation is actually only about 30 minutes, but then I include a lot of other information to give full context and clarity to the points I was making. The last thing I'll say is that if you would like to understand more about how I do advocacy, the way I think about things, how I approach people, how I interact with them, and how I begin to gather information that will help me to access the resources that I need for the people, or in this case, the animal who I was advocating for, then the Chili Adoption Updates playlist is a good place to move through. There's only about 20 videos in there. And a lot of them I made and shared with my playlist for children, which I put together to help parents have realistic conversations with their kids about what the Department of Defense is doing here in Norfolk, Virginia and Hampton Roads, which may be a playlist that you want to look through as well if you are a parent and trying to create task lists and want to have conversations with your kids, or would like to have some materials that you could use to help explain any questions that they have. I hope this video is helpful for some people in that foster care and adoption agencies and the parents who love the animals and kids who they take into their homes will look at this information and maybe have a conversation together so that we can begin to address the barriers and the people who are causing them in ways that will all allow us to move towards paradise worldwide.